Dragon's Rising has been consistent in its episodes for the most part. I honestly think that outside of a couple outliers, so far it's honestly been pretty good, and I think it's actually kind of reflected in that when you look at the reception on most of the episodes. But one thing I have wondered for a fair amount of time now is which of the episodes are not the best received critically. Of course, it does come down to a multitude of different factors, and the episodes that are the least popular will always vary from person to person, but I did wonder, from a certain perspective, what are considered the worst episodes of Dragon's Rising. So I went to IMDb and I filtered every Dragon's Rising episode by their rating, and I want to talk about the 3 lowest rated episodes for the video today, discuss what's in the episodes, what may bring down the score, and honestly whether or not they're deserving of being the lowest rated IMDb episodes. But I will say this, fun fact, they're not even that low of a rating. The lowest one that we're going to talk about today is only really a 6 out of 10, so that's pretty good, especially in consideration where the original show of Ninjago has much lower ratings than that. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about the 3 lowest rated IMDb episodes of Ninjago Dragon's Rising, and also let me know if you want me to do this with the top 3 of the current listings. But yeah, let's talk about this because I'm honestly kind of surprised, but I'm also not. I'm gonna go in order of the highest rating of the 3 to the very lowest of the bunch, but coming in at the number 3 spot and the 3rd worst rated episode is actually To Mysterium from Season 2 of Dragon's Rising. In this episode, we get to see Cole, Zane, and Bonzo make their way over to the realm of Mysterium, because that is where Bonzo was created by her original creator, so they want to go there in an attempt to learn more when it comes down to the plot to do with returning the Forbidden Five. Meanwhile, you also get to see the ninja struggle to be able to do Rising Dragon technique. You get to see them all fail in certain different ways, you get to see the ninja train in different ways, but we get to see scenes where Rontu finds herself more inspired when it comes to Sora and Ryu, and you get to see Aaron more specifically find himself more doubtful than ever. I find it interesting that this is considered the 3rd worst episode. It is definitely serving as more of a setup, definitely when it comes to the finale of Season 2 Part 1, but I don't think it's actually bad in that regard. But I do honestly see the point to an extent. I'm definitely going to be covering this with the other 2 episodes, but it definitely feels like this was the filler episode of Season 2 Part 1, because the ninja are attempting to learn Rising Dragon, but it's not exactly like they get anywhere. For the most part, the plot is quite stagnant, there's not really much in the way to do when it comes down to it, so the ninja are kind of just going through the motion that we've already seen in other episodes. There's just not exactly any sort of payoff. But the thing is that there are good scenes that are coming from this setting, because like I said, we have a scene where Rontu is sat there reassuring both Ryu and Sora, because she sees the potential in Ryu to be able to do much more, and she's reassuring Sora that she's not the worst thing that she's ever seen, because Sora is very much down on herself at this point because she doesn't even know Spinjitzu, and it's interesting for the character of Sora because it does demonstrate some jealousy because she is jealous of the fact that Aaron does know Spinjitzu. So it is interesting when it does come to these characters, so I can appreciate it for that reason. The Cole, Zane, and Bonzo stuff is definitely where I personally have a little more of an issue with the episode, because it definitely felt like they were just padding their time, because Zane just doesn't seem to have a reliable map according to him, so we get to see them in the crossroads for a bit, which feels like a little bit of a waste, and then they use a map just to end up having a really weird fight with Dorama, which starts and ends in the exact same episode. It's a really quick fight, they get trapped and they near enough immediately escape, and it just doesn't really serve much of a purpose, and it just ends off with the teaser that they have actually gotten to Mysterium and they have found the next monastery of Spinjitzu. So I definitely see where that is the downside of the episode in particular. But it's not exactly bad, or at the very least not worthy of the worst thing we've ever seen in Dragon's Rising. Yes, ultimately filler isn't the best thing in the world, and I completely understand it for that reason, because it does feel like for the most part this episode was a lot of filler, and whilst that is kind of fine, don't get me wrong, it definitely does feel weird, especially where it's sat in Season 2. I mean, think about it, an episode that is basically just filler is sat between the spell at the waterfall, which is an episode that gives more of an explanation on the Forbidden Five, gives more of an interesting arc with the ninja actually training, and gives us a story involving Wu. It's kind of difficult to compete with that. And then the episode afterwards, which is Fugitives from Madness, also does have a lot of really cool stuff in it. I mean, it has the J reveal, it has the Kai unlocking Dragon's Rising technique, it has the administration again. Honestly, it is so much better of an episode as well in comparison. So I do think that is the ultimate downside. 2 Mysterium was sat between 2 incredible episodes, 2 really good episodes that I really don't think it can stand up against. So for that reason, I understand why it kind of did worse in terms of its ratings. But I honestly do feel bad for this episode at the exact same time, because it's not a bad episode whatsoever. It does truly feel like it's just the fact it's sandwiched between 2 very heavy ones. So for that reason, I'm honestly kind of disagreeing with the fact that this is considered the 3rd worst episode according to IMDb. I don't think it's worthy of that whatsoever. But ultimately, it is where it stands. And it's not exactly like it's even rated low, like I said. It is still rated a 7.1 out of 10. That is still a fantastic episode. So even though it is down there, I don't think it's necessarily bad. But I still don't think it should be 3rd. But let's move on to the 2nd lowest of the episodes. The 2nd lowest episode according to IMDb is actually Season 1 Episode 15, which is They Call It Doom. And in this episode, we get to see all 3 of the ninja teams coming close to the end of their own respective hunt for their Dragon Core. We get to see Kai and Wildfire against Dorama and also the Lava Tides. We get to see Lloyd and Aaron in the gardens looking after theirs, and they're also with Raptor. And then we get to see Nia and Sora in the Land of Lost Things looking for theirs. Whereas instead of a core, they come across something else. Personally, I do think this episode is more of the consequence at the episodes that did come before, because the thing is that this is right in the middle of the Dragon Core plot, and it's more coming towards the end, but it's definitely of the consequence of the fact that we've already had a couple of episodes by now that are dedicated to the exact same idea. But the thing is that this episode does have a couple of things that is actually quite good to actually see, because even though a lot of this episode is what we've gotten before, and I will get into that into a minute, the thing is that the end of this episode is a very interesting setup to what is going to be coming later on, because not only is this where we get introduced to the administration and we get to see them take one of the cores, this is also where we actually get to see Nia finally encounter and find Cole. This is the episode that sets up the return of the Earth Ninja, and it's a fairly strong ending of that. And of course, the ending does not make an episode, but the thing is that that kind of ending is definitely very interesting to actually see. So I'm honestly surprised that this one got as low as it did. But that's the thing, it does have to then be acknowledged that the rest of the episode, for the most part, is just what we got before. Remember, we still just have Kai and Wildfire against the Lava Tides, we have them against Dorama at this point, and it's just a big scuffle between the lot of them, everyone just trying to get their hands on the Dragon Core with no determinable winner, because it's just constantly the Lava Tides just running around with it, so it's a little bit boring for that reason. I mean, the giant Lava Tide was fairly interesting to see, but it's not exactly like that could also carry an episode. And also, I will note that all the stuff that we get to see with Lloyd and Aaron is also just not really too much. The Mother Garden is really cool to see, but the thing is that apart from the stuff with Raptor, we still just don't really get too much with them either. It definitely does just feel like, again, another filler episode, and I do understand why it's this low for that reason, because ultimately speaking, like I said, apart from the end, it does just feel like a whole lot of nothing, really. It's just continuing the plot to get Dragon Cores, and that's just kind of it. I kind of feel bad for this episode for that reason. There are still another few details that do then go into other episodes, but we don't need to talk about those today. I mean, it sets up the whole thing of Wildfire having to deal with the fact that Heatwave was injured, and that is also fairly interesting, I guess, but again, that is just not really something that's expanded on in this episode, and apart from that, that's just kind of it. So, honestly, in comparison to the one that's 3rd worst, I'm actually kind of seeing the point on this one. Because again, on just an overall, even though the ending is cool, it's just a case of the other episodes do it better. I mean, we learn a lot more about the administration in the following episodes, and as well the same for Cole. So it does just feel like this episode, again, just doesn't really have too much. So I'm not really surprised that this is where it stands. It's still a 7 out of 10. Don't get me wrong. So it's not exactly like it did bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's only 0.1 below 2 Mysterium. So it's not, again, like it's considered a bad episode. It's just the fact it just doesn't really stand out. But yeah, that's the 2nd worst. Let's get on to the worst one. And that episode is, in fact, the episode as well from Season 1, which is Wildly Inappropriate. And this is considered the worst episode according to IMDb. And I kind of understand why. This episode again just mainly takes place within the ninja teams need to get the Dragon Cores plot, and I think for the most part people were just kind of sick of it because it did take up most of Season 1 Part 2. In this episode, we get to see Wildfire and Kai barely escape another obstacle on their journey, and despite their personality clash, they do finally reach the wildness, and the Dragon Core is possessed by the Lava Tides, and they force the ninja to clean up the mess that Wildfire created when she did actually live in the wildness herself. And then meanwhile, we get to see Zane take part in a study at the monastery's teleportation gate, and then he follows Mr. Frohike into the crossroads where they are hosting the Zane Day celebration. Now the thing is, as you know from the second to worst episode on IMDb, the whole plot point when it comes to Kai and Wildfire getting the Dragon Core wasn't even solved in that episode. So this episode is honestly kind of worse in that regard, because not only is it just them not getting the Dragon Core, we are just so far from the conclusion to the plot at this point. Of course, we get to see the whole interactions between Kai and Wildfire, and I do think for the most part that is fairly interesting because it does develop their relationship. But the thing is that it could have been done in so many other different ways, so for that reason it feels almost unnecessary to have them do it in such a dedicated instance. I'm not mad that they did take this time to develop their relationship because it does pay off in the long run, but the thing is that not only could they have done it in different ways, the future episodes in this very season also handle the plot points a lot better. This is of course just the setup for them to be able to do that, but again, they could have done it in so many other ways. And to be honest, the B-plot of this episode just doesn't help it at all, because the whole thing is Zane and Mr. Frohike needing to go to the crossroads to be able to get a coil to be able to reactivate the portal gate. And they do the whole thing with the Zane Day stuff, and they have to get money to be able to buy it from the junkyard, and it just kind of feels like a little bit of nothing. The Zane Day celebration stuff, obviously it's all to honor Zane, and I do think conceptually it is really cool, but the whole competition aspect where Zane got himself involved, it was honestly just kind of annoying to see, because the whole thing is who's the most like Zane, and for some reason, no one acknowledges the fact that it is very clearly Zane, even though they did think he was missing. I don't know if everyone in the Crossroads and in Ninjago in general is just face blind, but the thing is that it's not only that Zane looks like Zane, but it's also the fact that Zane quite literally uses his elemental power in front of them, which no one is actually able to do. Even though Zane uses his power to accidentally shoot it in the wrong direction, they don't acknowledge the fact that elemental ice literally came out of the man's hand. But no, we need to continue on the joke for no determinable reason. I know again it sets up this really nice little moment for Zane where he realizes, or he's worried more specifically, that he's not the Zane he used to be, and it gets rectified in the fact that he does get reassured, but the thing is that again it wasn't necessarily needed, and the whole thing just feels almost stupid to me. I just don't really understand why it was the case. And I do think that is the ultimate problem when it does come to this episode, and why I do understand that it is the worst of the bunch according to IMDb. The fact is that not only is it a filler episode where the A plot of the Dragon Core doesn't really go anywhere in particular, but the B plot is also extremely weak. So it does just feel kind of empty when it does come down to it, especially when Season 1 Part 2 does have some really cool episodes. But again, it's not even like this episode was rated low. This episode scored 6.4 out of 10, which honestly is fine. 6.4 out of 10 means that it is a decent episode. So it's not exactly like IMDb hates it or the viewers hate it. Critically speaking, it completely failed. It's just the fact that it just felt weaker because it's a 6.4 and that's the only episode in all of Dragon's Rising that went below a 7. So it does feel notable for that very reason. But I have to say, I do understand why it is the lowest rated episode, because by all accounts it is completely inconsequential. You could skip this episode in its entirety and it would make absolutely no difference to the plot whatsoever. The only kind of benefit to this episode itself is the development of the relationship between Kai and Wildfire. But like I said, you could have done that in a bunch of different ways. So even though it's not even that low of a rating and not too much lower than the rest of them, I do understand why it is there. But on an overall, it does go to show that filler episodes in modern day Ninjago aren't exactly the most appreciated when it does come down to it. It's not exactly like Ninjago never had filler episodes. They're as early on as Season 1. But the thing is that in the modern day, people are definitely more invested in the more heavy episodes, the more lore-droppy episodes, the ones that have the more big and ambiguous scenes, and the more ambiguous plots. But the thing is that there is nothing wrong with these by all accounts. They do fit the niche for certain people. And it is reflected in the fact that Dragon's Rising, by all accounts, doesn't have a terribly rated episode. It's just the fact that most people prefer the bigger ones. But do you agree with the 3 lowest rated IMDb episodes? Do you think there should be any others in their place? I personally, I can understand the 2 from season 1. I think 2 Mysterium was a little bit underrated in this regard, but again, I do kind of understand again because of the filler in its nature. But I would like to know if you do agree with them, because I do find it fairly interesting. And like I said, would you like me to go over the top 3 rated IMDb episodes? Honestly, it is a very interesting concept, and I would like to know what you guys think. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,